The idea of neurodiversity is now mainstream. We speak openly, well, sort of, about being autistic, having ADHD, or living with Tourette syndrome. But do we have a good understanding of what neurodiversity really is? How many neurodivergent people there are in the world? Where the line is between a disorder that needs to be cured and a mere difference in the body-mind wiring that needs to be respectfully protected as a part of cultural and biological diversity? These are not easy questions, and things can get emotional very fast as we start discussing neurodiversity. Because let us face it, as of 2025, there is simply no definition of neurodiversity everyone agrees upon. My name is Alisa Apreleva. I am a neurodivergent female postdoctoral researcher of neurodiversity in digital citizen science at the University of Oxford. I'm also a carer for several neurodivergent people in my immediate family, and I have 15 years of experience as a certified music therapist working with people all across the spectrum. This being said, firstly, I'm very much against the segregation of neurodivergent and neurotypical people. We are all human. And secondly, as a researcher, I'm doing my best to stay equipoised, which means not taking sides and just being curious about the phenomenon of neurodiversity, trying to understand it from the psychological, neurological, social, cultural, and historical perspectives. This first video is my good faith attempt to briefly summarize our current collective understanding of human neurodiversity, controversies included. And just because we need a starting point, here's my own imperfect working definition. Neurodiversity is an evolving concept that is often used to describe the full spectrum of human neurocognitive, communicative, and sensory motor differences from the social equality perspective. In simple language, this means we have this fairly new word, neurodiversity, which we often use to describe how all humans differ in how their brains, nervous systems, thinking, communication, movement, and feeling work. And, of course, one person cannot be neurodiverse, because there is no comparison to anyone else. Similarly, like your family cat or a lavender bush in your yard cannot be biodiverse on their own. So we can say that a community or humankind is neurodiverse, but a person would be neurodivergent or would belong to a neurominority. More about this later in this video. The terms neurodiversity and neurological diversity emerged in the 1990s, initially in relation to the autism variation known then as Asperger's syndrome, also informally and quite harmfully labeled as high-functioning autism, now diagnosed officially as level 1 autism. It used to be widely accepted that these terms were coined by an autistic Australian sociologist, Judy Zinger, although even this is now being debated after a very high-profile collective publication in the Autism Journal in 2024. But this is a topic for another video. What is important is that neurodiversity is not a medical diagnostic term, but rather a word to describe the social reality where people do not conform to one standard way of interacting with their environment, because we are all differently wired neurologically. Neurodivergence doesn't equal autism of any level. It doesn't equal dyslexia or bipolar or Alzheimer's. Neurodivergence and neurodiversity are wider concepts that exist in parallel to the very real needs, struggles, and hopes of people who are diagnosed or seeking diagnosis based on the challenges we encounter due to our unique neural wiring. I know it is a sensitive, controversial topic. Please bear with me, and hopefully by the end of this video we will share more understanding to move forward together. If you were to read only one article about neurodiversity, I highly recommend the one written by Canadian researcher Hagar Goldberg for the Encyclopedia Journal in 2023. Its title is Unraveling Neurodiversity: Insights from Neuroscientific Perspectives, and it is a wonderful, very accessible, in-depth overview. Let's dive in. The author suggests that neuronal phenotypes, or different brain types, are better described as continuous than categorical. This means there really is a spectrum of differences between human brains. Some people are quite similar to each other, and others differ a lot from each other in how their neural systems are organized. Yet there is no clear natural division between different kinds of brains. We're all the same species, and these differences are marginal. An analogy that is easy to understand here is human height. Some people are really tall while others are short, and yes, it may be convenient to have the big and tall and petite clothes size, and tall and short people do experience their environment differently in some ways, but fundamentally, we are all living the same human experience. Our height, as most other biological measurements, shows normal distribution. The global average female height is 162 centimeters, with 6 centimeters standard deviation. This means that any female by birth who is in between 153 centimeters and 171 centimeter tall is considered statistically typical in regards to her height. Everyone who is taller or shorter than that is considered statistically atypical. Our neural organization is much more complex, of course, but similarly, human neurotypes show normal distribution. The majority of the human population demonstrate neuronal and behavioral traits that are considered common, typical. This is how most people statistically perceive the world, communicate, socialize, move, think, make their sandwich for lunch, you name it. This majority is labeled neurotypical. The further away we go from the average, the more variation occurs in the brain. Each brain is unique, differently wired. We are all on this neurodiversity spectrum. Less and less common traits appear as we move towards the tails of the normal distribution curve. When a certain threshold is crossed, the brain wiring can be considered statistically atypical, and the person who has a statistically atypical brain is considered neurodivergent. Once again, just to avoid confusion, I'm not referring to the autism spectrum here, as neurodivergence and autism are two different things, even though they do overlap. I hope it is clear. If you have questions, please do ask me in the comments. As you see, neurodiversity is not about health and disease. Rather, it is a way to say that statistically, there is a minority of people whose brain function marginally differently from brains of most people in contemporary society. This difference can translate into different ways to think, to move, to interact with other people and technology, to experience the urban environment and nature, to express oneself creatively. It can also translate into unique abilities and additional support needs as a neurodivergent person navigates the world that is actively shaped to meet the preferences of the neurotypical majority. Here are two examples, and these are real-life experiences of people I have recently communicated with. A person with bipolar disorder may have difficulty aligning the ups and downs characteristic of this condition to the rhythms of regular social life. However, the down or private state enables them to concentrate deeply on their creative work. Another example. An autistic person can be very detail-oriented, thorough and structured, which can make them an amazing researcher, but they may have little tolerance for small talk and networking and for attending lengthy, noisy events like conferences, and this can stall their academic career. You can find more examples, well documented and evidence-based, in the 2020 review by Professor Nancy Doyle, published in the British Medical Bulletin, to which we will be back shortly. Neurodivergent people can be diagnosed or self-diagnosed with a wide range of neurological and mental health conditions, including, but not limited to, autism, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, Parkinson's disease, dementia, bipolar disorder, obsessive compulsive disorder, anxiety, depression, epilepsy, Tourette syndrome, traumatic brain injury, motor neuron disease, post-traumatic stress disorder, multiple sclerosis, chronic fatigue syndrome, Down syndrome, stroke, brain tumors, body dysmorphia, borderline personality disorder, schizophrenia, giftedness, and learning difficulties such as dyslexia, dyscalculia, developmental coordination disorder, and many more. At the same time, as I mentioned way too many times already, neurodivergence doesn't directly equal any of these conditions. We can probably say that someone who is extremely introverted or is very awkward physically or just very creative and generally quirky can be considered neurodivergent. The level of support neurodivergent people need can vary significantly depending on their condition and demands of their current living environment. Think about it, someone with dyslexia can struggle in the general classroom, but would probably thrive in a society where reading and writing are not essential to everyday life. Professor Simon Barncoin at the University of Cambridge, in his 2017 editorial perspective for the Journal of Child Psychology and Psychiatry, offers 4 terms roughly corresponding to the level of support a neurodivergent person may need, from disorder and disease, where medical intervention is desired, to disability, where the individual falls below an average level of functioning in one or more psychological or physical functions and needs support or intervention. And finally, difference, when person is simply atypical for biological reasons relative to a population norm, but where this difference does not necessarily affect functioning or well-being. As a neurodivergent person who simultaneously seems to fit into most of these categories, I have my doubts and questions about this classification, but again, this is a good topic for another video and a great ground for further discussion. As we see from the example with dyslexia above, societal perspective and environment play a huge role in what is considered a disability versus a difference. Think about left-handedness. If you're older, you may remember left-handed children being forced to use their right hand for writing or cutting with scissors at school. It resulted in unnecessary and unfair discomfort for these children. However, today left-handedness is fully normalized, at least in Europe and the United States, and adaptations are available, although not everywhere. Left-handedness is an example of neurodivergence, which can be considered a difference in some cultures. And this brings us to the next important point. In the same 2020 review, Professor Nancy Doyle studies neurodiversity through a biopsychosocial lens. Biopsychosocial approach to health and well-being is becoming increasingly popular and allows us to see a person holistically in a unique, complex interrelationship between the body, the mind, and the community this person belongs to. Whilst there is a biological reality behind neurodiversity in terms of varied brain's organization and functioning, most diagnostic procedures for neurodivergent people currently are based not on neurological but rather on behavioral and cognitive measurements. Simply put, quite often the diagnostics are provided not by a neurologist but by a psychiatrist based on standard tests measuring how apt or deficient the person is in different areas. This includes assessments of social behavior by the rules of the contemporary Neurotypical Society and intelligence tests, also known as IQ tests, which measure a person's abilities across different domains: visual, verbal, spatial, memory. This is far from perfect, but surprisingly, this gives us yet another way to look at neurodiversity. It turns out that where neurotypical people demonstrate a consistent level of intelligence, which can be whether low, average, or high across all domains, neurodivergent people tend to show the so-called spiky profile. Here's how it may look. It has been found that cognitive profiles of neurodivergent people show a lot of intervariability, which means they may score higher than average in one area, yet lower than average in another. These spikes will be distributed differently for people with different neurotypes, with different neurological and mental health conditions. For each of these, supposedly, there will be a distinct profile of ups and downs. A group of people with a similar spiky profile will usually share similar challenges and strengths, similar perceptual characteristics, and might need similar supports and accessibility accommodations. Professor Nancy Doyle introduces the term neurominority to describe such a group. So, to summarize, from a neuroscience perspective, neurodiversity is a concept that describes the neurological differences existing between people statistically, similarly to height or hair color differences. If a person's brain wiring fits within the normal range with the majority, they are considered neurotypical. If someone's neurological setup is different from the majority, they are considered neurodivergent. We all are on the neurodiversity spectrum. Every human being. We all have our limitations and our strengths. We have the right to dignity, understanding, and support. We have the right not to be judged for not quite fitting in. We deserve to be ourselves fully, without shame. Importantly, neurodiversity is not about withdrawing medical or social support from people who need those, or cancelling important research to find a cure for disabling conditions and to improve quality of life for neurominorities. If anything, the concept of neurodiversity helps advance this research. Simply having the word to name the phenomenon gives me, as a researcher, a tool to directly approach people of different neurotypes and ask questions about their experiences in the world, about their accessibility needs, communication preferences, or underutilized strengths. This knowledge is essential to create a more comfortable, less segregated, safer, more inspiring living environment for everyone. I really hope that this has been more helpful than confusing. I know neurodiversity is such a complex topic. As my research progresses, I will keep posting more, so please could you like and subscribe and share to increase the visibility of these videos and to show the algorithms that you care. And maybe next time I will have a better camera. You can read the full transcript of this video and find references to all the papers I cited and more in the link somewhere around. Do leave your questions and ideas in the comments and I will do my best to respond in future videos. Let us continue exploration together. Stay curious.